Imagine standing in a firing squad line in occupied Poland during the summer of 1942. The order comes, shoot the civilians. You are a Wehrmacht soldier, a police officer, perhaps even an SS officer. Around you, men are loading rifles. Behind you, superior officers watch. Before you, unarmed men, women, and children stand in a forest clearing, their fate written in the silence between commands. And then something unprecedented happens. One soldier lowers his weapon and speaks clearly. No. What comes next? Most assume execution on the spot, a concentration camp, perhaps reprisals against family back home. The machinery of Nazi terror offered no mercy for weakness, no tolerance for moral hesitation, or so the story has been told. Before we go deeper into how these acts of refusal challenged everything we thought we knew about Nazi Germany, make sure to subscribe for more history that actually happened. For decades after the war, a singular narrative dominated our understanding of German soldiers during World War II. Every order from a superior officer had to be obeyed, no matter the command, no matter the target. Failure to comply meant death. This belief was not merely propaganda repeated by those who committed atrocities. It was accepted as historical truth by veterans, by historians, by the international community that prosecuted war crimes at Nuremberg. The defense of superior orders became synonymous with the Holocaust itself, a legal and moral quandary that haunted post-war justice. German soldiers, SS men, police personnel, even concentration camp guards claimed they had no choice. To refuse meant to die. To hesitate meant to endanger loved ones. This was the machinery of totalitarian terror, absolute obedience enforced by absolute consequences. Yet beneath this monolithic narrative lay a question that no one had systematically investigated. What actually happened to those who refused? The answer began to emerge not on battlefields or in wartime documents, but in the quiet archives of post-war Germany. Beginning in the mid-1950s, the Federal Republic of Germany established the Zentrale Stelle der Landesjustizverwaltungen in Ludwigsburg, a central office tasked with investigating Nazi crimes. For decades, prosecutors and historians sifted through testimony, military records, trial transcripts, witness statements. They were searching for perpetrators, but in the process, they uncovered something unexpected. Cases appeared one by one of individuals who had refused orders to kill unarmed civilians and Soviet prisoners of war. Not isolated legends or disputed anecdotes, but documented instances verified by multiple witnesses and archival evidence. By the 1980s, historian David H. Kitterman had identified and analyzed at least 85 such cases. The individuals ranged from Wehrmacht generals to Ordnungspolizei officers, from Waffen-SS battalion commanders to rank-and-file police conscripts. They served in Einsatzgruppen mobile killing, units in reserve police battalions, in occupation commands across Poland, Ukraine, and the Baltic states. And the most remarkable finding emerged not from their courage, but from the consequences they faced. Not a single individual lost his life for refusing to participate in executions of unarmed civilians. The cases varied in method and circumstance, but they shared a common structure. An order arrived to execute Jews, Roma, suspected partisans, Soviet prisoners. The individual refused, employing tactics ranging from outright defiance to bureaucratic evasion. Superior officers reacted with confusion, anger, or tacit understanding. And then, in most instances, nothing happened. No firing squad, no concentration camp, no punishment whatsoever. This reality contradicted not only post-war testimony, but the very nature of totalitarian control. How could a system built on absolute obedience tolerate disobedience? The answer lay not in mercy, but in the complex, often chaotic nature of Nazi bureaucracy itself. Consider the case of Dr. Albert Battle, a 42-year-old lawyer and reserve major stationed in Przemyśl, Poland, in the summer of 1942. Battle was no resistance fighter. He had joined the Nazi Party on May 1, 1933, the same day millions of opportunistic Germans pledged allegiance. He belonged to the National Socialist Lawyers League. He was a Catholic who had once lent money to a Jewish colleague, an act that earned him a party reprimand and suspended membership for 1 year. Yet when the SS and security police prepared to liquidate the Jewish ghetto in Przemyśl on July 24, 1942, Bettel acted. He convinced his commanding officer, Major Max Liedtke, to issue written orders placing all Jewish workers employed by the Wehrmacht under military protection. Then he went further. Bettel ordered bridges over the San River closed to SS and security police units, physically blocking their access to the ghetto. He forced his way into the ghetto with his own troops and evacuated 80 to 100 Jews to Wehrmacht barracks, placing them under armed guard not from escape, but from the SS. The defiance lasted only hours. SS officers lodged complaints directly to Heinrich Himmler's personal staff. Himmler ordered an immediate investigation and had the results reported to him personally. On October 10, 1942, Himmler informed Martin Bormann of his intention to arrest Battle after the war and expel him from the Nazi Party. The immediate consequences came swiftly: a formal reprimand and transfer to a frontline combat unit. Yet Battle was not executed. He was not imprisoned. He survived the war, and decades later, the State of Israel recognized him as righteous among the nations for his efforts. His actions had not been mere refusal to participate in murder. They constituted armed resistance to SS operations, a direct challenge to Himmler's authority. And the punishment amounted to a transfer and a bureaucratic black mark. Bureaucratic channels provided another avenue of resistance, one exploited by officers who understood military hierarchy better than their SS counterparts. Bernhard Griese was born in 1887 in Ribnitz and had retired in 1936 as a major in the Schutzpolizei, the uniformed order police. Recalled to service when war broke out, he commanded Police Battalion 323 in the Jorgenburg area near the Białowieża forest in occupied Poland. In 1941, an SD officer personally requested that Griese provide men for the execution of Jews in the area. Griese refused. He did not argue morality or invoke conscience. He invoked procedure. He immediately ordered his senior captain to remain at headquarters and forbade any personnel from participating without Griese's direct written authorization. Then he traveled to his headquarters in Königsberg and obtained a formal written order stating that Griese was only obligated to provide men if the SD presented written authorization from his commanding officer, the Befehlshaber der Ordnungspolizei. Armed with this bureaucratic shield, Griese returned to find that the SD had carried out the execution of 365 Jews themselves during his absence. The SS and police opened an investigation into Griese's refusal. An officer from the main office of the Ordnungspolizei in Berlin traveled to Königsberg to conduct the inquiry. Griese testified, explaining his adherence to proper chains of command. The investigation was dropped, no charges filed, no punishment issued. Shortly thereafter, Bernhard Griese received the Knight's Cross. The irony was absolute. A man who had refused to participate in genocide received one of Nazi Germany's highest military decorations. The system rewarded the soldier who understood its rules better than those demanding murder. Not all refusals ended so cleanly. Some cases revealed the limits of Nazi tolerance, the boundary between acceptable evasion and intolerable defiance. Dr. Nicholas Ernst Franz Hornig was a first lieutenant in the Wehrmacht, a lawyer and Catholic transferred to a police battalion after prior service. On November 1, 1941, near Lublin, his battalion commander ordered him to execute 780 Soviet prisoners of war who had been separated from a larger group at Stalag 325. The method was explicit, a bullet to the back of the neck in a small forest between Lublin and Lviv. Hornig refused. He assembled his officers and men and told them plainly that he could not carry out such an order. His reasons were threefold: his background as a jurist, his faith as a Catholic, and his honor as an army officer. He told his men that shooting defenseless people was not merely a crime, but reminiscent of the GPU methods of the Soviet secret police. None of his soldiers participated, though they were ordered to guard the outer perimeter of the execution site. Hornig then left the area. His battalion commander searched for him in vain. The consequences arrived 5 months later. In May 1942, Hornig was arrested on orders from the chief of the SS and police court. He was not charged primarily with refusing to obey orders. The main charge was Wehrkraftzersetzung, undermining military morale. Hornig's crime was not that he refused to kill Soviet prisoners. His crime was teaching his soldiers that German military law gave them the right to refuse illegal orders. The first trial in November 1942 resulted in a sentence of 3 to 4 years in prison. A second trial in March 1945 increased the sentence to 6 or 7 years. Yet neither sentence was ever carried out. Himmler refused to sign the judgments, apparently considering them too lenient. Instead, Hornig was sent to Buchenwald concentration camp, where he remained from November 1942 until the end of the war. But his imprisonment carried an extraordinary caveat. He retained his officer rank. He received his full officer's pay. His detention was classified as investigative arrest, not punishment. He was not treated as a typical concentration camp prisoner. He survived the war. The pattern repeated across 85 documented cases. In the summer of 1941, Friedrich Dürn commanded the Reichsführer SS Escort Battalion, a Waffen-SS unit formed from Himmler's personal guard. Ordered to provide a company for execution duty, Dürn's subordinate, Second Lieutenant Schreiber, reported that his men had been forced to shoot Jews and Poles. Schreiber refused to allow his company to participate in future executions. That evening, Dürn composed a formal report to SS headquarters in Berlin, clearly and unequivocally refusing to allow his battalion to serve as executioners. Within days, orders arrived dissolving the entire battalion. Companies were reassigned to SS regiments across the front. Dürn was summoned to Berlin, where Gruppenführer Pohl personally censured him and issued new orders: report immediately as a major to a fighting battalion in Kirkenes, far in the Arctic North. Yet Dürn's career did not end. By December 1941, he commanded SS Jäger Battalion 9. He later commanded the 14th Galician Volunteer Regiment, a position he held until the war's end. Open defiance of SS directives resulted in reassignment, not execution. The methods of refusal varied as widely as the men who employed them. Some refused outright, stating plainly they would not participate. Others invoked conscience, religion, or moral principle. A few cited damage to emotional or psychological health, real or feigned. Officers demanded written legal authorization, court documents, the presence of judges and prosecutors before executions could proceed. One Schutzpolizei major in Sumy refused an SS order to execute Jews, demanding to see legal judicial sentences and insisting on proper judicial oversight. When the order was repeated, he refused again and reported his refusal to his regiment. No punishment followed. Instead, an order went to all Schutzpolizei units, stating they were not to be involved in executions. In the Eichsind Ordnungspolizei, entire chains of command sometimes protected subordinates. One police officer telephoned his superior in Krakow and explained that SS and police leader Odilo Globoknik had ordered him to execute Russian prisoners and Jews. What should he do? He did not wish to participate. His chief of staff, Rudolf Müller-Bönig, told him not to carry out the order. The role of the Ordnungspolizei was not to execute people. Major General Riga, the regional police commander, agreed and called the officer back personally. If Globoknik issued another execution order, tell him the Ordnungspolizei were not hangman's servants for the SS and SD. When the chief of the Ordnungspolizei in Berlin learned of this, he informed Himmler, who agreed that Ordnungspolizei units were not to be included in executions. Globoknik lodged a formal complaint. 2 months later, Riga was transferred to Prague. No other consequences befell the officer who refused or the chief of staff who supported him. Evasion tactics ranged from the bureaucratic to the desperate. Some men hid behind vehicles that transported victims to execution sites, making themselves unavailable for firing squads. Others threw away their weapons or claimed they were lost. Some deliberately shot wide, missing targets repeatedly until reassigned. One Wehrmacht officer allowed Jewish captives to escape when the SD officer supervising the operation stepped away. Guards assumed it had been authorized and let them go. There were cases of men feigning illness, incompetence, even madness. A few threatened force when coerced, raising loaded rifles against their own officers. Collective refusals occurred when entire units declined participation. Individuals exchanged prisoners for wounded German soldiers, invoking economic necessity to prevent killings. The statistical analysis revealed patterns as remarkable as individual cases. Of the 85 documented refusals, over half involved direct refusal with no other stated method. 10 men refused and formally reported their refusal to superiors for protection. 23 cited humanistic, religious, or moral reasons. 15 regarded the orders as illegal. Only 8 invoked emotional or psychological damage. 15 requested transfers or resigned from their branch of service. 12 were officers who refused not only for themselves, but also forbade their units to participate. The majority were officers, 67% of all cases. Officers understood military law, bureaucratic procedure, chains of command. They knew how to navigate the system. Enlisted men comprised 33%, facing greater risk but still finding ways to refuse. The consequences defied expectation. 57% of those who refused faced no negative consequences whatsoever. Several were promoted after their refusal. One man was sent to a concentration camp, but for teaching soldiers about military law, not for refusing to kill. 3 others were sent to frontline combat units, a common fate for millions of German soldiers, regardless of behavior. Investigations were opened in some cases, then quietly dropped. Reprimands were issued, threats made to send refusers to concentration camps or the front. Most threats were never carried out. Transfers occurred in 16% of cases, often back to Germany, hardly a punishment during wartime. 2 officers saw their units dissolved after refusing orders. 7 men experienced demotion or lack of promotion. 4 were forced into mild participation, such as driving officers to execution sites, digging pits, or guarding outer perimeters. 3 resigned or were removed from positions. Not 1 was executed. The findings did not mean severe punishment never occurred. Legends persisted of German soldiers shot for refusing to kill. Josef Schultz, allegedly executed alongside Yugoslav hostages for refusing to participate in their execution, became a symbol of conscience. Yet historians dispute the veracity of the account, considering it more legend than verified fact. Otto Schimek, an Austrian soldier reportedly executed for refusing to shoot Polish civilians, became a symbol of pacifism in post-war Austria. But documentary evidence remains contested, the story possibly invented or exaggerated. Verified cases of execution for refusing to kill civilians remain absent from the extensive archival record. The implications cut to the core of post-war justice. At Nuremberg and in thousands of subsequent trials, defendants invoked Befehlsnotstand, the compulsion of superior orders. They claimed they had no choice. To refuse was to die. Their families would be endangered. The Nazi system left no room for conscience. Yet the archival evidence told a different story. Refusal was possible. In documented case after documented case, men refused and survived. The machinery of totalitarian terror proved impotent against those who knew how to navigate it. The system built on absolute obedience tolerated disobedience more often than it punished it, provided that disobedience followed proper forms, invoked proper channels, or simply occurred beyond the immediate gaze of the most fanatical enforcers. This reality does not diminish the courage of those who refused. Bernhard Gries did not know, as he traveled to Königsberg to demand written authorization, that the SS would drop their investigation. Albert Battle did not know, as he ordered bridges closed to the SS, that Himmler's retribution would be delayed until after a war Germany was already losing. Nicholas Hornig did not know, as he assembled his men to explain why they must refuse, that he would survive Buchenwald with his rank and pay intact. Each man faced uncertainty, the possibility that this refusal would be the one met with execution. They refused anyway. But their survival undermines the central defense of those who participated. The choice existed. The consequences, in the vast majority of cases, were survivable. Reserve Police Battalion 101 provided perhaps the most documented case of refusal offered and largely declined. On July 13, 1942, the battalion under Major Wilhelm Trapp was ordered to round up the 1,800 Jews of Józefów, Poland. Men capable of work would be sent to labor camps. Women, children, and the elderly were to be shot on the spot. Before the operation began, Trapp assembled his men and did something extraordinary. He explained the mission, then offered any man who felt unable to carry out the task the chance to step aside without consequence. Only about a dozen men accepted. Lieutenant Heinz Buchmann, a 38-year-old Hamburg businessman and reservist, was among them. He told Trapp directly that he refused to participate in shooting defenseless civilians and requested alternative duty. Trapp reassigned him to escort the Jewish men selected for labor. Buchmann faced no punishment. His refusal was noted, accommodated, and he continued his service. The overwhelming majority of his comrades proceeded with the massacre, not because they feared death for refusing. The offer had been made. Refusal carried no penalty. They killed because they chose to kill. The statistical truth remains uncomfortable. Over 100 documented cases of refusal, yet these represent a fraction of the millions of German soldiers, policemen, and SS personnel who participated in or witnessed atrocities across occupied Europe. The rarity of refusal raises questions as disturbing as the consequences of refusal itself. If punishment was rare, if death was not the inevitable result, why did so few refuse? The answer cannot be found in the threat of execution, for that threat proved largely hollow. It must be found elsewhere, in ideological conviction, in careerism, in peer pressure, in the numbing effects of violence, in the distance created between perpetrator and victim, in the bureaucratic language that transformed murder into special treatment and genocide into resettlement. The machinery of the Holocaust did not run on fear of punishment. It ran on the willingness of ordinary men to commit extraordinary evil when given permission, when surrounded by others doing the same, when told that such actions served a higher purpose. The refusers themselves offer little unified profile. Some were deeply religious Catholics who invoked conscience. Others were lawyers who cited military law. A few were career officers protecting their professional ethos. Some simply could not bring themselves to shoot women and children. Dr. Albert Battle had been a Nazi Party member who once faced discipline for helping a Jewish colleague. Bernhard Gries was a retired police major who understood bureaucracy better than ideology. Nicholas Hornig was a Wehrmacht officer whose legal training taught him to recognize crimes regardless of who ordered them. Friedrich Dern commanded Waffen-SS troops, but refused to let them become executioners. They came from different backgrounds, held different beliefs, yet all arrived at the same conclusion. This order will not be obeyed. The post-war trials that documented these refusals were not seeking heroes. Prosecutors were building cases against perpetrators. But in the testimony of witnesses, in the statements of defendants, In the archival records of investigations, the pattern emerged. Refusal was possible. Survival was probable. The defense of superior orders rested on a foundation that archival evidence had eroded. Herbert Yeager's 1967 study analyzed 103 cases. Kitterman's 1988 research expanded to 85 cases with more detailed analysis. Both reached the same conclusion. No documented case resulted in execution for refusing to kill unarmed civilians. The majority faced no serious consequences at all. The totalitarian system proved less total than its architects claimed, and its victims feared. What does history learn from those who said no? Not that resistance was easy, but that it was possible. Not that the system forgave dissent, but that it often could not effectively punish it. Not that millions should have refused, but that the excuse of inevitable death was a lie. The machinery of the Holocaust required willing participation far more than it required terrorized obedience. The evidence suggests that those who pulled triggers, who operated gas chambers, who loaded trains and guarded camps, did so not because a gun was pointed at their own heads, but because they accepted the logic, the orders, the normalization of mass murder. The refusers proved that another choice existed. Their survival proved that choice was survivable. The vast majority who did not refuse cannot claim they had no option. They had the same option Bernhard Griese chose when he traveled to Königsberg to demand proper authorization. They had the same option Albert Battle chose when he ordered bridges closed to the SS. They had the same option Nicholas Hornig chose when he assembled his men and taught them that military law permitted refusal of illegal orders. They chose differently. And that choice, not the false necessity of obedience, is what history must remember. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.